All right. Good morning, Doug. We are back with questions from members of the file. Today is a holiday, it's Independence Day, July 4th. So the question is, what did this holiday mean to you when you were 20 years old? And what does it mean to you now?
Nothing, frankly. It was just a holiday. It means more to me now than it did when I was a kid because you don't think about these things in their ideological or philosophical context. I don't think when you're a kid. In fact, uh, even though I went to good quote unquote schools, we never read the Declaration of Independence
Hmm.
while I was in school. I mean, maybe some classes did. I don't know, but oddly enough, none of my classes ever did. And
Hmm.
the one comment I'd have about the 4th of July is it doesn't celebrate the start of the revolution, which was, depending on how you want to define start, was 6 or 7 years before, or at least a year before, with Lexington and Concord, which was a year before the signing of it. And it doesn't celebrate the end of the war and the British going home, which was what, 1783, something like that. Uh, it celebrates the document. And the Declaration of Independence is a great document. It's unique. It's wonderful. So I'm all for it. But the fact is, I don't celebrate it. And the average American, it's just an excuse to have a barbecue with hot dogs and maybe
And
shoot
a
off some
parade.
fireworks.
And
Hmm?
a parade. And a parade. I always remember the
And a parade.
parades.
That's right. And anyway, how free a country can it be when you're not even allowed to have your own fireworks? You got to have the government shoot them off for you. So it's a fraud, frankly. I'm disappointed in it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely Declaration of Independence has much more significance to me today, but the 4th of July holiday, it's come to be, I see it as a celebration of the state and an inducement. You're supposed to be patriotic today, and patriotic not toward the ideals of the Declaration, but toward the state itself, which is has problems.
Yeah, and it's about military parades and flying military aircraft over your town, if you could round them up,
Yeah.
which,
Well,
it's
they're mostly in the Middle East right now, so they don't have a lot available.
right. Yeah, so yeah, it's a problem.
All right. Well, so the big beautiful bill passed. It's made it through the Senate, got lots of new amendments to it, and well, what do you think of it being passed? It seemed absolutely critical in Trump's mind that it get passed, and it did. And so, what do you think about it being passed, and what's in it?
I haven't read it, nor do I intend to read it. Uh, there's so much of this stuff that's cranked out of Congress every year. I mean, what useful purpose is it going to serve me personally to read all the bills? I'm not interested. Life is too short. I have other things I want to do with my time. But it's responsible of you, because I know you told me that
I'm
you know, you're
trying.
going you're going through it, and I respect that. You're being diligent, much more than I am. So you tell us, what have you found so far?
Well, I'm not that far into it. It is 839 pages. Um, but, the first part, it opens with things that are kind of conservative crowd pleasers. Things like, cutting immigrants or illegal immigrants off of this food stamp program and Medicaid, stuff like that. It's all that, so far so good. But starting on page, I guess it was 28, it covered a topic that probably also would be a crowd pleaser with most Americans, but for me, it's just this huge pet peeve. It has to do with farmers. And I think, and I, as a guy who grew up in the Midwest, was surrounded by farmers constantly, always complaining about the weather, one way or another. And I wasn't a farmer then. I am now. And I understand the weather complaints, now why they were complaining about it. But the idea that a farmer would complain about the weather today is kind of weird because they are a protected class. And what they did is they really ramped up the levels of protection that they have in this bill. There's lots of goodies and handouts to them to make sure that, if the price is too low, well, the government, will pay them for it. The government subsidizes. There's a couple different insurance programs that they could. Well, here's one interesting thing. Did you know that not only they have something called the reference price, and the reference price is statutorily set by Congress. And for corn, for instance, it was 4.10 a bushel. And if the average price over the last 5 years is lower than the reference price, they basically get compensated the difference. So what they did is they raised that reference price, and that's not the crazy part, though. What the crazy part is that it's based upon acreage that has historically been planted. So you don't have to plant that year. Okay, so you can plant nothing and you still get paid. Yeah, isn't that weird? And it's based upon
Hmm.
land that was farmed in the mid 90s. If it was farmed in the mid 90s, then it qualifies. You could basically just, as long as it's still used for some agricultural use, like you got a couple cows out there running around, or maybe you plant some hay, a crop that isn't covered, you still qualify. I mean, I found that insane, actually. Um, and they increased all these things, and now there's these two insurance programs, and uh, instead of signing up for one and committing, you can decide one year or another which insurance program you want. You could, whichever one pays you more, you could go with that one. It's so there's lots of handouts for the true welfare queens of America, which are the farmers. And I'm not, the vast majority of the benefits that go to this are not, of course, your family farm. I mean, it goes to these giant conglomerates, it goes to these huge companies. It's something like 70% of all of it goes to, a handful of companies, 10% of the companies. But still,
Well,
it's like,
when I looked into it years ago, during the 90s is the last time, I checked out what it cost to pay off the farmers. And even back then in the 90s, when this was real money, it was about 30 billion a year. And interestingly, it was more or less the same amount for the farmers of the EU, and the farmers of Japan got almost as much, which is a much smaller group. So farmers all over the Western world get these payouts, creating huge distortions in what they can grow, what they can't grow. It's completely insane.
yeah, it's the other part of it. You wonder why when I grew up, the world wasn't all monocrop. I mean, in Iowa, driving around, you'd have a guy who'd have some corn and he'd have an apple orchard.
Mhm.
It'd be variety. And so when we were looking for ranches in the US, I couldn't find one that wasn't mono whatever. I wanted some diversity. They just don't exist anymore. And the reason why is if you want to qualify for these subsidies, you can't. You can't grow vegetables. You can't have these other things there. So isn't that weird? Like so it's totally distorted the entire food system in America along the way. It's just a disaster. So I got stuck on this, wrote an essay about it. So that kind of held me up for a while. But then, it goes into lots of other things. Some positive things, like it locks in the tax cuts uh, that Trump initiated earlier. There's no tax on tips. There's no tax on overtime. One of the best things that I think is in there is that it allows, if a company is making a big capital investment, that they can write it off as an expense rather than having to amortize it over 30 years or whatever, which really encourages investment. And I think that that's super positive for sure. But there's lots of defense stuff in here, of course, too. Increase in defenses, defense spending overall, but also a lot of public-private partnership type defense innovation stuff that's in here too. And the again, I'm only on like page 200 of it. But one of the things they did is there's a thing called the Defense Production Act, which is something that came out in the 1950s during the Korean War, where essentially the president can demand that a company do whatever. Right? I mean, he basically has like king-like powers. And this we saw this briefly during COVID, where certain companies were instructed to produce PPE gear, for instance. They were told they had to. When the fallout with Elon Musk, um, Steve Bannon said that Trump should invoke the Defense Production Act and take SpaceX away from Elon. I mean,
I know. Shocking, shocking.
that's the powers that are in here, though, the Defense Production Act. And in it, it's about this long, literally, of text in there, but it allocates $1 billion for the president for the Defense Production Act. Now, the president can take money from almost anywhere for this purpose already, but it sets aside especially a billion. And my guess is that goes into trying to provide funding for some of these critical materials that are necessary for war making ability. And there's a lot of other things that support that too, loans that are in there and things like that. Um, but I've never seen it. I've never noticed it called out before, where it's a budget item where he's got $1 billion for Defense Production Act.
Yeah, well, it's a perfect example of fascism where, from what I understand, not having read it, is that it basically lays out a lot of industrial policy where the government will orient what industry and average people do.
Yes, I think that's exactly what it is. And I mean, if you look at it from the ag part, there's price fixing. Okay, so it's like you're going to produce these things. You don't have to produce them. You could not produce them and still earn money, but these are the things that we want produced, and we're willing to guarantee uh, prices for those things. From that to where there's, targeted industries mostly designed around military use and critical minerals and mining, and this should serve our portfolio well, frankly. But yeah, he's basically through carrot and stick, I think, saying this is what the country is going to do. And that top-down approach is going to cause, distortions. There's no doubt about it. And industrial policy has, it's been done in wartime, right? But has it ever been done in a time like, peacetime?
Well, any bill that's almost 1,000 pages long, it's got two components, I would think. Here's what you have to do, and here's what you can't do, and here's how we're going to pay for it, which means taxes. And I know that he's increasing spending on the military. And what we were talking about with agricultural, the way the government has distorted things with these gigantic monocultures, it's very, very dangerous when you have not just a few fields here and there, but if some kind of a fungus or a virus or an insect goes wild, it can wipe out the whole agricultural system, not just be a local inconvenience. So these giant monocultures are time bombs waiting to go off, as far as I'm concerned. And this bill and government policy in agriculture just encourages that kind of nonsense.
Yeah, and the other thing about the covered crops, just take two, corn and soy as an example, only 10 to 15% of that is actually for human consumption.
Mm.
It's not food, you know. It's I mean a lot of it ends up being, for animal feed. I mean the biggest or in the case of corn for bad fuel, low quality fuel which we don't need. Um, so it's
Expensive fuel, which it's like burning money, putting
Yeah.
ethanol in gasoline.
Yeah, especially when we got plenty of oil. Like, we shouldn't be using corn for that. So it's just, you know, and as a guy who owns a cattle ranch, I don't need corn or soy meal to feed my cattle. It's not necessary. So it's a little bit different with pork and chicken, where they do need some more protein in there. But anyway,
I know.
uh,
It's all a fraud where on your milk carton, they show Bossy, in a field full of flowers eating grass with a smile on her face, but really she's just shoulder to shoulder in a feedlot slopping down on silage, which is put before her twice a day.
ex
It's all fraud. It's disgusting.
it is. So I don't know. I don't have a firm opinion yet on the big beautiful bill, but if I could find the time, I'll get through it. I'll tell you after getting to the farming
Well, my
stuff and
wife
writing it.
looks at these things and she tells me that part of the bill or something that's happening apart from the bill is that they're turning ICE, the agency that tracks down illegal aliens, that its budget is going to be equivalent to the third largest military budgets in the world. I don't know if she's where she got this or if she's right, but ICE's budget is supposed to be something incredible, like $200 billion per year to round up agents. Have you heard this? I mean, ICE is going to grow like the TSA did. It's going to grow like a real cancer to round up all these aliens.
Let me ask ChatGTP about it. I haven't gotten that far in the bill yet. It's going to take a minute to research it, but when it comes up, we can come back to it.
Okay. Anyway,
Uh, so the next question is about apparently Sierra Leone has a citizenship by investment program for 100K and change. It gives one access to pretty low quality travel document. However, it gives one access to purchase property in Sierra Leone, which is otherwise barred for non-citizens. Are there real estate opportunities there that might justify becoming a citizen?
uh, it's the type of place that if there's real estate for sale and you can make it productive somehow, somebody like Eric Prince would be the person to buy it because Sierra Leone had one of the nastiest civil wars in African history, and there are going to be lots more, but it's a very unstable place. It's uh, it's one of two. The other place is Liberia, where they re-exported slaves from who came to the U.S. and they were sent back to Africa. And Sierra Leone was one, and Liberia was the other. And the slaves basically took over the countries, and they became very unstable. Civil War. Why anybody would pay $100,000 for a passport, a worthless passport from a shithole country like that? No, forget about it. I mean, that's an interesting bit of trivia, but no, you don't want that. You want that passport? It's worthless.
The passport's worthless, and you're paying 100 grand for the right to buy property in a unstable hellhole. I don't know.
No, no, it makes no sense.
All right, Doug, do you have an opinion on
I
these
didn't know. I
two?
didn't know. I didn't know that, and that's interesting. Uh, and it's gonna pad the pockets of certain Sierra Leone politicians. That's what's gonna happen to the money. Okay, that's great.
Yeah. Do you have an opinion on JEPI or JEPQ? Both these are JP Morgan uh, tickers, kind of funds of a sort that use options to generate income.
Well, I've used options for many, many years, and they serve a purpose. If you sell calls against your portfolio, you increase your current yield, you limit your upside, but also you pad your downside if the market goes the other way. So there's nothing wrong with it. It makes sense. I mean, it's a path up the mountain. You increased yield, you get the dividends from stocks plus the plus the option premium. But if there's a huge bull market, which is the best thing that can happen, you lose a lot of the bull market upside. But like I said, it somewhat ameliorates your losses if we get into a bear market. So they're okay, but no real opinion.
Okay. Doug, what are your thoughts on short selling? Is it a healthy part of the market? Is it the free market, in your opinion? I've often heard short sellers being described as part of the healthy market. Do you agree?
Yeah, they are because if short sellers will go out and identify uh, companies which are poorly run, or that have highly promoted stocks, and sell them, so that when they eventually do collapse and they have to buy the stock back, they provide a cushion where they're buying stock when nobody else is, just like they're selling stock to go short when nobody else is. So short sellers are an important and beneficial part of the market. Of course, there are a lot of governments that try to outlaw short selling because they hold the market down and everybody wants a higher stock market. But it's so short sellers are great. And I think finally, short sellers are going to have their day in the sun now because it seems to me the market's grossly overpriced. Hey, but I've said that for the last several years. And if I'd been short that during that time, you would have had your head handed to you. So
Yeah. What about what about naked short selling? That's essentially where you don't own the stock that you are selling short.
because you can't borrow the stock for some reason, you're broke. Well, it's supposed to be illegal, but anything that happens between you and your broker, I mean, one of you could go bankrupt if the market goes the wrong way. I don't see a problem with it. I mean, a
Well,
lot of a lot of people try to blame the collapse of crappy little stocks on naked short selling. Okay, but people are always looking for an excuse on things which are like Nietzsche said, things which something that's about to fall deserves to be pushed. So nothing wrong with naked short selling. It's illegal generally, but I don't see anything wrong with it.
hmm, okay. Um, let's see. This guy says he recently signed up for SWP Cayman. They sell and store gold. This is something we've talked about in the past. SWP has a vault where I live, but I want to ship a portion of my metals to the Caymans. I'm curious if there's an easy way to do this, maybe via the local vault.
Well, I think it makes sense to have some of your gold or silver, because they do that too, outside of your home country. And the Caymans is a good place to store it. So, sure, I think it's a good idea. But that's a question that SWP can answer as far as how to do it and so forth. It can be done. It's not a big problem. I've shipped gold via Brinks from, well, in my own case, from Hong Kong to the US. Absolutely problem free. So SWP can handle it all for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, and or the local storage facility, the local vault. They'll
Yeah,
know how to do it. So yeah, just
that's what they
ask.
do for a living. Yeah.
Doug, in the first novel in your current trilogy, with the fourth one on the way, the first one was called Speculator. There's a lady character working as a doctor for charity on the ship stationed in Africa. He says he forgot the name. Was she inspired by someone Doug met in real life?
No, she was inspired by somebody that John Hunt met in real life.
Oh, really?
Yes, because you've got to remember that these novels are a collaborative effort where John and I each do different things. And as far as the everything, it's we both add things together. So it's a very good co-authorship venture.
Hmm.
It's perfect. And John's background, he was a doctor in the Navy, and he was stationed a number of places around the world, and you know He was a doctor sailor. And so, yeah, part of that is, out of John's imagination or John's experience, not necessarily mine. Other parts
Hmm.
are out of mine. So, but
Uh,
that in particular is John.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. All right. We can only speculate, Doug, but how long do you think before Ukraine collapses? He says, in my opinion, it strongly resembles 1945 Germany, and as Hemingway famously noted about bankruptcy, slowly then all at once.
Yeah, well, it should have collapsed a long time ago, and it would have if the US had not been sending lots of, scores of billions of hundreds of billions at this point of money and weapons to to prop up a totally corrupt regime, absolutely and abysmally corrupt. In other words, the US is directly responsible for hundreds of thousands of young Ukrainian men being killed and maimed. Because if we hadn't kept this war going, it would have ended. And it would have ended very simply and peaceably with the Donbas provinces becoming either independent or part of Russia. End of story. Because they're all Russian speaking people there anyway. That's what it was all about to start with. But as usual, the US, you know, does its thing. And now who knows how it's going to end now? I mean, and Trump could have ended it. I mean, this is one of the many reasons that, you know, I'm entertained by Trump. I enjoy watching him. He's a lot of fun. But I think he's a pathological, worse than pathological, he's an enthusiastic liar. He could have ended that war his first day in office, like he planned to be, just by stop supporting the Ukrainians. End of story. It's a border war on the other side of the world. None of our business, but still might turn into World War III.
So do you think, do you, uh, I mean, how long before it collapses? If it could turn into World War III, it could mean that it doesn't collapse.
I think it's going to collapse anyway. I just hope that Putin doesn't decide to take over most of the Ukraine. I think that'd be a mistake because at this point, a lot of the Ukrainians have become Russophobes, and maybe he's buying a guerrilla war for himself. I think that'd be foolish. He ought to stick with his initial objective, you know, liberate the Donbas provinces, ensure that Crimea remains part of Russia, which it always was, and walk away from it. So I hope that's what Putin does. But we're dealing with psychopaths. All these people that run countries are psychopaths.
Yeah, and clearly there's a lot of people in the EU, at least, that do not want it to end, and are taking actions to make sure it does keep going. So
This is one of the most criminally stupid things that Trump has done so far. It's basically telling NATO countries that they have to spend 5% of their GDP on military spending. Against who? Why? To provoke Russia? To further bankrupt their populations? To militarize their countries? It's unnecessary, unneeded. I mean, it's just crazy.
all right, so this ventures into next question ventures into what many would call conspiracy theory, and it has to do with chemtrails. He says, a good friend of mine, Peter, who is married to a charming Lithuanian lady, is moving to Paraguay. Initially, he was looking at it as a plan B, but after 6 months renting there to see how it goes and just kind of check it out, they're selling their house and land in Lithuania and making the move. During the time in Paraguay, they didn't see any chemtrails. On the strength of this alone, they'd be willing to make the move. He says, we do have chemtrails in Lithuania, at least every second day. Sometimes the rain here leaves a residue on the surfaces it touches, cars, roofs, etc. And it's easy to spot, and the metallic element is detectable. He said to me the other day, look up, that isn't natural, that isn't good for us. I agree with him. You can see the chemtrails, and they are significantly different than the contrails I grew up with in New Zealand. The line of a chemtrail can extend right across my view of the sky, then expands slowly, becomes a haze as it dissipates and descends into the earth. Sometimes 4 or 5 stripes are active at one time. Peter said in 6 months he never saw them in Paraguay. So the question is, are you seeing chemtrails in Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, or Brazil? And do you think they play a part in the bigger picture?
Well, I've always been skeptical about it. I mean, conspiracy theory, I don't have any real knowledge or feeling for them. I mean, all I know about weather modification, other than what I've read, is that I know that when I read Uncle Scrooge comic books in the 1950s, Donald Duck got into a weather modification scheme and was cloud seeding. Uh, that was an episode in an Uncle Scrooge comic book. So this whole thing with cloud seeding has been around for many, many years. And they used to use just sodium iodide to make the clouds, to bring the moisture out of the clouds and congeal it, and it would rain. But I don't know, you know more about it than I do, certainly. I can't answer the question.
Yeah, I think it's important with these any of these topics like this is to focus on what is knowable and what is observable, and not necess and don't automatically jump to the answer as to what exactly is going on. I think, you know, so for instance, definitely weather modification is real. It was in that Scrooge book you talked about. I did some research, and there's a trade association for weather modification that was started in the 50s. It has various companies or participate in it today as a trade association. There's a company called Weather Modification Inc. If you follow, like, there's these online flight tracking tools, you can see where they take off from, and the plane is registered to Weather Modification Inc. and you can see where they're working. I found contracts between various counties and these guys to do it. So I know that so some people deny that any of this is happening at all. And I know that there are companies that are doing weather modification. And uh, now what exactly they're doing and how they're doing it, I can't be sure, but it does exist. And I do, when you look at the sky, it doesn't make sense sometimes where you'd see these crisscross patterns, and you see it does turn into a haze. And so I know there's a lot of doubters out there, and I just say look at the sky more often and just watch what happens and see. It's interesting. It's interesting. There's something going on. Now, what is it? We don't know. We do know that there's an active campaign happening in the UK right now, sponsored by Bill Gates, designed to block out the sun to deal with global warming. We know that exists. I mean, it's all been very well documented. Um, but what exactly are they releasing? What are the reasons why they're doing it? I mean, who knows? I will say I watch out for it all the time just because I know something's going on, but I have never seen it here in Uruguay at all. And my guess is it's just not worth the jet fuel, you know, to come all the way down here. The population's too low, so I've never seen anything like that here.
Well, that makes sense. And I'd like to get a definitive answer from a miscreant that's in back of it all, if that's the case.
Yeah, well, I know there is some Lufthansa pilot who came out as a whistleblower who, and he could be full of shit. I don't know. But say he refused to do it and he got fired. So it was a commercial aircraft that did it. And that was just within the last I think 4 or 5 months, and where I saw him talk about that. But the thing is that what exactly are they doing and why are they doing it? We have to jump to conclusions because we can't know. We don't have any evidence of that. So I don't know. But yeah, it's never seen it here. Next question is, Doug, given your insights into political dynamics and human behavior, what do you make of NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte's strategy in using flattery and terms like daddy and his SMS and public comments to appeal to Donald Trump's narcissistic personality? Do you think this approach effectively manipulated Trump into securing the 5% defense spending commitments, or does it risk undermining NATO's credibility in the long run?
NATO doesn't have any credibility. I mean, it's it, it's a charade, and it should have been abolished 30 some years ago when the Soviet Union collapsed. It serves no useful purpose. It's a self-licking ice cream cone for people that like to dress up in military costumes. I mean, it's crazy. The whole
But
thing is crazy.
but it wasn't it weird though, him calling him daddy? Did
Yeah,
you see that?
yeah. It's. I mean, these people have bent psychologies. They really do.
Yeah, it really was weird. It was bizarre for an adult man saying that to another adult man. I don't know. I don't know.
Exactly. Entirely apart from the fact that Trump really is a narcissist. He's an egomaniac. He's a megalomaniac. I hate to offend dyed-in-the-wool Trumpies we have out there because we both recognize there are some good things that he's brought upon the world. But
Yep, and there are a lot of good people who support him. Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. And I'm sure that if you're just sitting around having a couple of beers and a couple of laughs, I I think he might be a lot of fun. Something which I could imagine myself saying about Joe Biden. But NATO should be abolished. That's in fact, Europe doesn't even need a military. A military against who? I mean, it would serve no useful purpose. Even if Russia could conquer Europe, it would serve no useful purpose for Russia to conquer Europe. This isn't like the days of the Roman Empire, where you steal the cattle and the gold and the women, and you make a lot of money. I mean, today, if you conquer Europe, all you're going to have is an expensive uh, liability and maybe a guerrilla war on your hands. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It won't happen. Why?
Let's see. Does Doug have a method behind screening writers for his International Man blog or for crisis investing? Does Doug search for anything in particular? Interesting people, ideologically sound people, talented writers, successful investors, etc.
Well, for International Man, we have a full coterie um, with Chris McIntosh and Nick Giambruno and
Jeff Thomas.
Jeff Thomas and myself. And who am I forgetting about? Anyway, so we can't really use anybody for that. However, if if you're a market maven and you can fill a blank spot in the market, like if I'd find it very interesting if somebody could look at things from the short side, companies that would be good to buy puts on or sell calls against because they're poorly run or engaging in a fraud or are in the wrong business at the wrong time. Uh, I think trying to be a short seller over the last few years would have been very unrewarding. I think that might change. So if that person's out there and is listening to us, we'd like to hear from them, I think.
Yeah,
But
yeah. I think there's if you're interested, send us essentially a draft of a newsletter, more or less, where you make a call on a company and explain why the price of it should go down and the mechanics of how one ought to short it. And we'll take a look at it because
yeah,
it is something we could add to our we could launch a new letter around it potentially. Yeah.
good. And one thing I've always liked in the area of shorts is to find a a particular sector of the market. Any sector. It could be defense, which is the wrong word, or it could be aviation, or it could be mining or oil or anything, and pick a long prospect a well-run company with a cheap stock and a short prospect. A poorly run company with a, and so you're long one and short the other. So you're market neutral and you're just betting on those
Mm,
elements that I just mentioned. I mean, that's actually the ideal kind of short letter that during this recent bull market that we've had would have insulated you from the fact the market itself was running up because you're, if I'm being
right.
clear.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, I get it. I get it. Yeah. I mean, I think, good writers are, I will say we do like to include in all the writing that's in all of the places, that are yours, um, people who are ideologically sound, because one thing that you always do to sometimes people's frustration maybe is that you take whatever matters in front of you and you pull apart the moral problems. You kind of meta the problem into the larger issue, which is usually comes down to some morality of some kind. So having being sound ideologically is important. I also think being a good storyteller really matters. You have to be entertaining. You have to engage your reader. It's not just about having the information. You have to be able to explain it in a way that makes people, if you're talking about a particular, stock that you want someone to short, you have to sell them on it by, I mean, making it interesting and entertaining and getting them enthusiastic about the idea and not just simply giving them the facts. So good writing makes a big difference.
Yeah, because the facts are out there. I mean, if you dig around with the internet, I mean, you can find all kinds of really interesting facts, but they have to be presented in a cogent, logical way. So there's more to it than Googling stuff and
Right.
putting
And if
numbers
you
on.
and let's say we've got the right answer. Like we know that this stock is going to go like we have high confidence a stock is going to go up or down for whatever reason. And it's our obligation once we have that conviction as within our paid publication to encourage as best as we can the person to participate in our high conviction idea, and that requires salesmanship. It requires a story. It requires the evidence, of course, but more than just the evidence. So but it isn't just a matter of it's like when we publish a letter, we don't just say buy X and that's the end of it because frankly that's all they should need, right? But if you actually want you want to educate them about the world, about the universe that that company operates in, and what the issues are with that company in particular that make it unique and the situation unique, and you have to draw them in with all this with good writing to make it really
Yeah,
work.
yeah, exactly correct.
Okay, does Doug think tracking an analytics dashboard platform for farmers to monitor their complete operating activity and budgeting with time alerts and educational tips is a good company idea, given the growing trend towards farming and the inevitability of a younger, more tech-savvy population moving into the farmer role?
Hmm. I don't know how to answer that question. Do you have an opinion on that, Matt?
I think there are a lot of companies that are working on analytics type stuff for this. So, but I have to say, I, you, you'd have to be, there need to be proof that it actually makes a difference. Because I'll tell you, most of the businesses that I've run in the past, non-farming businesses where we have lots of analytics, they tell a story, but that story is never the complete story and often can be misleading. So, I guess it depends upon the product, whether or not it could be useful. If it's going to make people more money, yeah, of course. But you got to really have something special to do that.
Yeah, I wonder about, we talked about some things about farming earlier, but I wonder about the direction that farming is going to become more and more high tech. Like if you buy a tractor today, Uh, you're not even allowed to work on the tractor. You, I mean, forget about the fact they're computer driven, and it's farming is not what it was even 50 years ago, for sure.
No, it's not. I mean, I can fly my drone over my land and it'll tell me about my land. I can run it through different analytics and it'll tell me about it can, it would be better if I had crops and not just pastures. But these tools, some of these tools are already out there. They're a little hard to use. But yeah, again, if it can make people more money, make them more effective, then selling to businesses is a great. I mean, anytime you can do that is great. But I'd love to see what the product would be. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm more inclined towards what would be known as gardening as opposed to farming. Gardening being many different things on a small piece of land, basically for personal consumption, which is different from farming, which is different from mass
Right.
agriculture.
Yeah, we basically are gardeners with a cattle herd that are supposed to finance everything. That's the idea. Um, but let's see. Okay, next question. Does Doug have any thoughts toward Bolivia right now? On one hand, it's cheap, like Argentina used to be, with high inflation. Some folks love it and could be littered with crisis investing opportunities. On the other hand, as Doug said, it's Indian country. It's wildly inefficient and has gasoline shortages.
Yeah. Actually, Bolivia is one country in South America that should uh, be divided into at least two countries.
Hmm.
The highlands, where the Indians are, and the lowlands, where the Spanish settlers are and the good agricultural land is. I think it's an unstable place, always has been unstable. So, no particular opinion about it, except, it's kind of when you're there, you're there. And
You know what I
yeah,
hate? I'm very worried in this, what feels like this crisis era we're in, and it's accelerating, where you have a setup of divisive, cultural divide within a country. These, what, specifically in Bolivia, it would be, the racial divide between the indigenous and the Spanish, and those situations
yeah,
can
you
go
don't want to be
bad.
someplace where there's that kind of conflict that you can get swept away in, really. I
Yeah.
mean, they can steal your stuff, and if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, something worse could happen. So I put Bolivia very low on my list.
Okay. Let's see, a couple more questions. Being a proponent of privatized military, what are Doug's thoughts on Eric Prince and Blackwater? Prince believes there needs to be a government-run military, but should be supplemented with privatized organizations like his own. Would Doug agree?
Well, I suppose everything should be privatized. So I suppose, I suppose Prince is right, assuming that the government really, because what's the government going to use its military for? Is it going to be defending the country, or is it going to be used aggressively in foreign? Actually, you've got to look at what are militaries. You've got basically three types of militaries. You've got um, you've got slave armies, which are draftees put in uniform involuntarily. You've got uh, mercenary armies like Eric Prince's, for instance, and then you've got basically militias, which are people that are defending their own home and property, but aren't permanent professional soldiers of either of the other two types. Those are the three types of militaries, I think. So that would be my answer to the question.
And the only one I could really endorse is the militia one, honestly.
Yeah, me
Because
too.
the militia one it's very limited in what it does. It's defending your place, your country, not going out on adventures and not making sure that, as Eric Prince is very interested in making sure that the Venezuelan government changes, for instance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't care what Venezuela does with its
No,
government.
it's a great adventure for Eric and the people that he hires. And if he goes in there, I mean, he might be able to make or steal a lot of money, but it's none of my business, frankly. It's in Venezuela,
Yeah.
wherever.
Okay, so last question. Japan is famous for its economic stagnation over the last 40 years. Maybe this is more than anecdotal, but some Japanese companies are entering the US with a seeming vengeance. Nippon buying US Steel, Tokyo Gas, and uh, Mitsui operating in American shale oil, and even Houston's Minute Maid Park, that's the Astro Stadium, was recently renamed to Daikin Park, which is a Japanese air conditioning company, apparently. Is Japan making moves? What's the play?
Hmm. I'm not really sure what's going on in Japan, quite frankly. One thing we know about Japan, it's what we also know about Korea and a few other countries, is that they're in demographic collapse. The average woman has only 1.2 or 1.3 children, so that in a couple of generations, the population is going to be much, much lower than it is now. Maybe that's a reason why corporations that want to maintain themselves want to go to some place that will kind of still be around. But it's a
Yeah,
good
that's
question.
that's what makes sense to me. I mean, that definitely makes sense to me. Is that that could be the big reason behind it? I mean, these companies, they have a life of their own. They want to survive and grow, and maybe they have to get the hell out of Japan, or at least not limit their operations to Japan in order for that to happen.
Yeah, because Japan is about the oldest country in the world at this point. Where what's the number? It's rather shocking. Something like a third of the population are over 65 years old.
Wow, that's a
So,
lot.
but the good news is that we'll have robots that will take care of those old people. They won't need to import Africans to Japan
Yeah,
to.
the median age is 49.
Wow.
That's old. I thought Uruguay was bad at 36, but 49, that's amazing. Wow.
Yeah. What will happen to Japan if the current trend continues? And the same is true of Korea and a lot of other countries around the world. Actually, I understand that Iran, of all places, has a similar problem. It's like 1.4 kids per woman, something on that order.
Let's see what the median age is there.
Even Brazil has a less than 2.0, which and people think of Brazil as being full of kids, like you saw in that movie City of God.
Yeah. Brazil's median age is 34.8. Median age is 34 in Iran also. It's 36 here in Uruguay. I mean, this is a trend everywhere.
Except Africa south of the Sahara, where the median age has got to be much, much younger.
Yeah. Uh,
In my house, the median age of dogs is about 8, I think.
that's up there, Doug.
It's getting up there. That's right.
That really is that's like Japan level stuff. We better be careful. You need to get some puppies.
Yeah, it's just that I need more dogs.
Yeah, the median age in sub-Saharan Africa is 19.
19. Wow.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well,
Well,
that's all the questions.
we better send them more foreign aid so they can keep reproducing.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I don't want to get into the reproduction topic again. That really bothers people.
Is that right?
Well, remember from our conversation the
Oh,
other
yes,
day.
of
Yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, that's all the questions I have for you today. Guys, especially members of the file, subscribers to Crisis Investing, if you have questions for Doug you'd like me to ask him next week, then go ahead and post them, and I will make sure they get on the list and we'll ask him. So that's it for now, Doug. Have a good weekend. Happy holiday weekend, I guess it is. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to devote this weekend to doing some more of my part of the work on this book, the preparation that we're working on. So I'll be busy.
Awesome. Good. Me too. I'm going to finish up my last bit as well. Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Have a good weekend.
You too, Matt.